Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Climate and Culture Action Team. We're super excited for today's special presentation where we have our wonderful 2024 Diversity and Inclusion Fellows, Daniel and Megha, presenting urban hotspots. And we're just really excited to have you both presenting to us. We are just excited to learn more about urban hotspots, its effects, and what's going on in the cities that you both live, which I know you'll be covering as well. So over to y'all.
Okay. Thank you, Manev.
So I guess I could start off by introducing myself. My name
Yeah.
is Megha Bhatt. I live in Sacramento, California. I was born here and I've been a Diversity and Inclusion Fellow for 6 months now. And yeah, super excited to be here and share this information.
And I'm also Daniel Opoku. I actually live in Toledo, Ohio, and I just graduated from Bowling Green State University with a master's in science, which is applied geospatial science. And I love maps so much. That is why, I actually suggested we include transportation into this, major heat effect topics. So Manev will carry on with the next slide, right? And Megha.
So in this presentation, we will be covering heat islands. We will be talking about case studies with Columbus, Ohio, and LA, California. And we will also be discussing effects of emissions.
Yeah. So talking about the heat islands, talking about the transportation, talking about effects of emission and everything. We wanted to get the connection. Why, when we want to talk about heat in urban areas or urban hotspots, we want to know the heat in these places. How does it really correspond to transportation? And then we really wanted to get some data to back what we knew already, what happens in these urban cities, what really amounts to these emissions that causes this heat in these urban places. And we found out at the USGH, which is the greenhouse gas emission website, we got their data that shows the amount of carbons that are emitted into our various cities or into each and every places. And we realized that most often in the country, you realize transportation amounts to the highest, let me say the highest part or the highest percentage when it comes to carbon emissions in these urban cities. And then it comes to electricity, it goes down to residential, which is about 6%. And this is one of the reasons, or this is the major reason why we want to focus on transportation when we want to talk about heat in these urban areas. And when you go to the next slide, it actually talks about the various transport systems that amounts to a certain percentage or a certain amount of carbon emission in the cities. So which vehicles, which type of vehicles, which transport system that people use that actually amount or that actually builds up to this higher amount of, or this about 25% amount of carbon emission in these cities. And we realize that the normal day-to-day vehicles that are the light-duty vehicles amount to the highest percentage, which is about 57%. And that is what usually we use when we are going on our daily workplaces. I mean, places that do not have a major transport system or a major transit system or an effective transit system. People normally use their light vehicles, people normally use their cars, etc. to go in and out of there. And this actually amounts to the highest part of, or the amounts to the largest percentage of heat emissions in these places. So if you're able to get public transit or public transport system that are effective, I think the percentage of this light duty vehicles that people use on their daily basis will actually reduce. And it's gonna have a major impact also on the emission of carbon in these areas or in our cities. And in total, I think it's gonna really help this heat in this hotspot or in this cities go down. And Megha will continue with the temperature and then heat islands.
So global temperatures have been rising every year. This summer there was record heat waves all across the country and even the world, and there were so many heat-related issues from it. And quote by Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, extreme heat is having an extreme impact on people and the planet. The world must rise to the challenge of rising temperatures. And you can see on this map, like the rising of all the temperatures. So even like where I live, it's been over 100 for so many days in a row. Like I think it reached a new record. So it's definitely been hard on, just everyone in general.
And just like it's happening to the rest of the world, US and its environment is actually not, excluded. Because when you get to the US, you would also know that in our major cities here, you found out that there are a lot of factors that amount to this heat, that amount to this urban heat island effect, or that amounts to this heat in our cities. And you find out most often these built-up areas are full of parking lots, are full of, asphalt areas, are full of activities that are going on. And most often you even find out these cities that are hotspots or that are heated are, are lacking a lot of trees, or a lot of trees in these places are being cut down. And sometimes it goes even beyond the cities and it extends to its environment. Like where I live, for instance, Toledo is not actually a bigger city as compared to Columbus, Ohio. But at the end of the day, you realize it's the impact on these cities affects its surrounding, and then you go out to work during the summer and you actually experience excess heat. And I think it happens to most cities in the US, which Chicago is not excluded, Philadelphia is not excluded. So sometimes because of these build-up factors, or because of these build-up let me say factors that amount to it, a place or a city that is supposed to have a temperature of maybe about 90, or maybe assuming it's supposed to have a temperature of about 80 during the summer, would go up and have a temperature of about 90 or of about 89 degree Fahrenheit. And this is actually in excess because they could have been lesser, or they could have been cooler if these buildup or these things that amount to the buildup in these environments were decreased, or if they were worked on, or if we didn't really allow it to get to this extent or point. And the next slide actually shows us how cooler each and every city or each and every place that is shown on this scale would have been if not for these build-up environments, or if not for these heat amplifying factors that are in this build-up environments, if not for these asphalts, if not for these buildings that we are actually building in these cities, if not for these activities, a place like New York could have been maybe 9.6 degree Fahrenheit cooler than it is now. A place like Miami could have been 8.4 degree Fahrenheit cooler than it is right now. So this is what these heat amplifying factors are causing to this series of build-up areas.
This map shows the urban heat index of Los Angeles. It's basically calculated in each city to estimate how much hotter these areas are due to how they are built. So as you can see on this map, it shows on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest intensity and getting to 10 on the highest. And on this map, you can see that a lot of it is like on the higher end because it's such a urbanized area. A a lot of people rely on cars. Transport isn't the best in the area either. So yeah, it's making the area hotter just because of that.
And just like Megha's place, Columbus is also hotter, depending on the scale provided up there. But you realize that LA is much more hotter as compared to this one you are seeing. And what do you think would be the reason for that? The reason for that is maybe the heat amplifying factors in LA is actually much more, or it's really intense as compared to place like Columbus, which is also, I mean, Columbus is the largest city in Ohio. That was the main reason why the focus was on Columbus. And you realize Columbus is also heated, but comparing how heated Columbus is to what Megha shows us, you know that Columbus is, less heated than LA because of these factors. And yeah.
So the heat can have a disproportionate effect on disadvantaged communities. Like for example, a lot of Black and African American populations, are the most at risk, with 34% living in areas with increased childhood asthma and 40% living in areas with heat-related deaths. And even Hispanics and Latinos are 43% more likely to live in areas with less labor hours due to the heat, and they're 50% more likely to live in areas with traffic delays due to flooding. A lot of this is because a lot of these areas don't have a lot of shade. They don't have a lot of trees. They may not be able to afford AC. So it definitely impacts them a lot more. And on the next slide, um, it continues. They, like I said, they're least able to access heat coping tools. It's more harder for them to get to like cooling centers. 3/5 of southern LA, which is mostly filled with people of color, do not have access to an AC in 2020, and 64% of those people live below poverty level. Climate resilience programs also leave out a lot of these neighborhoods, and they're mostly enacted in the wealthier areas because of the allocation of resources, the unequal allocation of resources. So one of the solutions could be trying to bring more awareness to the fact that a lot of these disadvantaged communities and poorer neighborhoods are being left out, and try to allocate more funding to these neighborhoods so they can have ACs, have access to cooling centers, or even be able to afford a car with a working AC.
A tale of two cities. I think it should have so with this actual project, our major focus or our major case that we really wanted to work on was on transportation, or how transport affects or impacts heat in these urban cities. And the focus was on Columbus and Los Angeles because Megha is actually in Los Angeles, and I'm also from I live in Ohio, Toledo, and Columbus is the largest city in Ohio that you would be able to get what you want to use as a case. And I feel like maybe we could have considered other places or other suburbs, because I think now it's not only urban areas or urban centers that are actually heated, because I feel like now all other places are having excess heat. All places are having, I mean, heat in excess during the summer, and even during the days that you do not really expect, you do not expect that amount of, or that high of temperature, to be. And I think it's fine. We could, based on this, to make a lot of analysis on other cities and its extension to suburb areas and stuff. So that is okay. So I'll be talking on Columbus, Ohio, or the Franklin County, and Megha would also talk about Los Angeles. And with this, with the Columbus, Ohio, let me say it was a project that I actually started working on for a while, and all the maps and everything that are, or that will be shown are actually, being done or were being, prepared by myself. And with this is just a steady area of Franklin County. And this just shows the shapefile. When I say the shapefile, I mean how the county is actually shaped when you want to put it on paper, how it's actually shaped. And I got the data from two, different places. I got the road and then the bus stop data from the National Transit maps, and I got the apartments data also from US Census Bureau. And I actually used some method of GIS methods to do a whole lot of things. But the common things that I would like to mention are the, proximity analysis. When I talk about the proximity analysis, it's literally how close the apartments are from the bus stops. So literally, I wanted to show and know why people are not using public transit or public transportation system, and why people in Ohio and Columbus in particular would want to use their personal vehicles, for work activities, would like to use their personal vehicles for other activities that they would be able to use the public transit, or that they can be able to use the public transit and then, in the long run, minimize the carbon emission in the system, and which will come down to, minimize the heat in these cities. So I wanted to know why and then how we could possibly help resolve this. And if you want to know that, you would want to know why people do not really leave the apartment, or why people do not really move to bus stops that are closer to them, or why people do not really get bus stops to move to. And that was what I did with the proximity analysis. I just wanted to know the distance from their apartments to their bus stops. And then I used the buffer of, there is this buffer analysis in GIS, which is more like a distance from where you are. So I just wanted to know and assume or take a walking distance of about maybe 12 minutes or maybe 10 minutes. So if people are to walk from 10 minutes from their apartments to bus stops, would they be able to do that conveniently? And then would they be able to, meet the time and then what they need to go to their workplaces? If not, why are people not, walking that distance? But if people are to walk, I think walk more than 12 minutes to a bus stop, or walk more than maybe 0.5 miles to 1 mile to a bus stop, I don't think, I don't think no one is going to do that. I don't think anyone would like to walk that far. That was why I actually chose. I think the distance I actually used was 12 minutes walk, which is 0.5 miles. And I also did overlay. Overlay is actually talking about where I got the data from the two layers from apartments from the US Census Bureau, and I got the bus stop data from the National Transit maps. And then I wanted to really combine these two data and show it as it is now, and put them together and let it be visible for, people to see and then know what's going on. And that's simply the overlay. Putting one of the layers on top of the other. And that was what I did here. So this is literally to show the raw data of Franklin County, and then the apartments, which are in pink or red color, and then the bus stops, which are in yellow dots, and then the bus routes, which are, the line, the light green line, and then the whole brown surface you see is the county, which is the Franklin County, which is Columbus. Okay, can you move to the next slide? And working on that, this is after performing, the GIS analysis, you realize the apartment to bus stop distance that I used was 0.5 mile. So I assumed that if someone is supposed to walk from the apartments to the bus stop and is within 10 to 12 minutes walk, the person would love to do that, which is the 0.5 miles, or less than, anything less than 0.5 miles, which is approximately 12 minutes walk. I assume that people will love to walk to bus stops that are much more closer to them. And I assumed that if people are supposed to walk from 0.5 miles to 1 mile, maybe people will love to ride bicycles to these bus stops and then move on with it, but it's still gonna be difficult. So anything above 0.5 miles, I assume it's going to be very difficult for people to walk to those bus stops that are closer to them. And the ones in green actually shows, or the dots in green shows, the bus stops and the apartments that are within a distance of 10 to 12 minutes walk, which is 0.5 miles walk. That is a walking distance that people would love to walk to pick buses to their workplaces. And then this would, if people are to move to these bus stops to pick buses to their workplaces, they aren't gonna use their personal vehicles, they aren't gonna pollute more. The transport or the transportation report that shows 25% higher amount of carbon emissions would actually get down and then reduce, and in general heat is gonna be reduced. And the ones in green are actually showing the normal distance or the average distance that people would like to walk. And you realize that there are centers at the center. And these are the downtowns most often. The downtowns has a lot of bus stops. The downtowns are mostly clustered with a lot of bus stops and apartments that sometimes people would love to use these buses. People would love to get to the closest bus stops and then move to their workplaces, as compared to moving out of the downtown. So moving out of where the dot is actually, the green dot is clustered, you realize there are less of the green dots. That means there are less of a walking distance, or the distance from the apartments to these bus stops, they are out of places, or are not close to anything within 10 to 12 minutes walk. And then they are not able to use these bus stops. Either they are not active, either they are not working, or these bus stops are actually not in use now. No one goes there. And these people would use their personal vehicles. And you realize this is Columbus. You realize the center that is green has a lot of bus stops. One reason is because of the university, Ohio State University, that is actually closer to the downtown. Students normally, when they come to school, would love to use buses, and school campuses actually operate with these buses. And that is the more reason why you find a lot of them there. So I think maybe spreading it up would make a lot of sense. And on the next slide, we would know how it looks like, or yeah. So this is literally how it looks like. So all the ones that were red in the other slide, all the ones that were light yellow were not included. So this is the distance, or this is the average distance that is actually normal for people to walk, or that will make sense for people to walk to these bus stops to use these buses. And you see the bus route, it goes up, and then it goes going out to the outskirts, or moving from the downtown to the suburbs. You realize less of this connectivity between the bus stops and then the apartments. And there are these bus routes that if government, or if the federation or federal, those in authorities are supposed to work on, I think they could maybe better place these bus stops at these bus routes, which are closer to apartments and then closer to where people would be able to work and then walk to. And then we can talk about how effective, or whether people would want to use, and why people wouldn't want to use these buses as a result of other challenges. And with this data, you realize out of the 31,000 residential apartments, only 23,000 are within a walking distance, which is 0.5 miles. That means over 70% are actually within a walking distance. And the rest of the 30%, what happens? They will then use their personal vehicles. And you realize the bus stops too has over maybe 50% within apartment walking distance. That means a lot of the bus stops are actually not in places that people would be able to walk to, or are actually not effective, as in even when people walk to, there are no buses operating. There are no buses operating at these places. And you realize sometimes there are buses operating, but they only use that route whenever they want to use it. If, you know, they are not enforced to really use it, or if they use it for a while, and I think people are not, using that particular bus stop. That is one thing that I also realized. And I think if these bus stops or these bus stops were really positioned at the right places, or if the maybe 50% bus stops that are not positioned at that walking distance were really positioned in these distances, I think it could have done a lot. It could have solved a lot of these emission problems with regards to the transportation. And I just took a picture of one bus stop in Toledo that will be shown on the next slide. Yeah, this is just literally a bus stop in Toledo, Ohio, that shows how people use buses and these bus stops. And you realize there are no people here. It's literally one of the busiest bus stops in Toledo, Ohio, but it's literally not effective. It's not working as it's supposed to be. And maybe due to other reasons, people would also not, want to use this bus stops. But yeah, that is a talk for another day though.
And I will discuss Los Angeles, California. And just for context, our light rail is basically kind of like the metro system, like California's version of the metro. So bus and light rail ridership, it peaked in 2019 at 370,983,141, but it started decreasing, and in 2016 the bus ridership fell at 304,160,857, and it's for the light rail ridership, it seemed that it has increased a little bit from 2009 to 2016, but overall, a lot of people probably don't want to choose to ride them because well, first, they're not very reliable. They take a lot of time. But yeah, it's slow, it's hard to access, it's not reliable. And especially like communities with more diverse populations and lower incomes, they rely on transit. The top 5 neighborhoods have like a median income of 31,490, and that was some of those neighborhoods include Pico Union, Koreatown, and the Westlake neighborhoods in Los Angeles. So this indicates the use of public transit in the LA area. The green dots indicate where people use the public transit the most, and that's where the top 5 neighborhoods I mentioned before are located as well. Another issue with bus stops in LA is shade. So only 26% of bus stops in the LA Metro provide shade. And as I mentioned before, a lot of those people who use public transit, they're on the higher end for risks in heat-related issues. In 2020, there was a study by the Los Angeles Urban Cooling Collaborative, and I found that as Los Angeles gets hotter, Black, Latino, and older adults will experience the largest increases in mortality due to increases in extreme heat, and that all ties in with the fact that it's harder for them to get to like cooling areas, or a lot of them don't have AC or shade, so it's harder for them to find relief in high heat, like peak heat temperature times, and sometimes at night it doesn't cool down. Like I know a lot of the days in summer this year where I live, it didn't cool down. It was still like 90, 80 over high 80 degrees at night. So without that cool down period, it's a lot like it's more strain on the body. It's a lot harder for people who don't have access like cooling or anything like that to be able to regulate their body temperatures and be able to withstand the heat. So carbon emissions can also affect people from, especially from transportation perspective. So 29% of greenhouse gas emissions, they come from the transportation sector, and they are highly concentrated in urban areas such as LA and Columbus. Health concerns of pollution disproportionately affect children, pregnant people, people of color, older adults, and those living in poverty. And the reliance on car culture in these urban areas increases the pollution, which can exacerbate existing issues that are coming from the greenhouse gases. So we wanted to have like an open conversation and talk about these questions. So what are your conclusions and recommendations on this? Think about how the transport system is at wherever you live, either city, county, region, or state. Do the challenges you encounter at the metro or bus stations align with the research shown, or is it different? And as for public transport and bus stops, should and can they be closer to more residences? Do buses arrive at their scheduled time in your areas? And how do you fix or improve poorly located bus stops? And we can leave the conversation to you guys.
So I think Karina just said something. Karina, you want to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was thinking about the information that you were sharing. So I'm in Florida. I'm in South Florida particularly. And we have a lot of traffic. It is impossible for us to survive without a car. So the amount of public transportation that we have is very minimal, even though we now have like a it's almost like your metro Megha, but we have like a train that goes from like Miami to certain parts of Florida. But it's like very limited. Like we don't have the kind of public transportation that I know that we need, and I know that we have so many people down here. It's yeah, it's just difficult to try to think of like how we can correct it. And I know that the other part of it, as you guys were mentioning in your own cities, we also have like, you know, the heat is unbearable here. Like the other day it was 108 going outside. And I'm thinking, I don't think I can survive being in a bus stop or a train stop with that kind of weather.
And I think now it doesn't even matter where you live. It doesn't. I think it shouldn't even be focused. It shouldn't be heat. What do you call urban heat hotspot? It should actually be general heat hotspot, because suburbs and even places that you do not really expect, you know, a certain temperature or a certain heat would actually have that experience, and you'll be so marveled. I mean, this summer I worked out a lot, and some of them I would have to collect data and then go back to the office to, you know, work on, analyze, make some maps and, you know, one or two things. And you don't really expect Toledo to be heated that much, but I don't know. You go out there and be like, no, I just want to go inside today. I'm not collecting so much data, because it's actually the heat outside is in excess. And yeah, it's sometimes, you know, crazy irrespective of where it is, whether city or so. I don't know, Manev, you just moved from Miami. I don't know if it's because of the heat or you planned to actually move from there.
Yeah, a mixture of both. I did plan to move from there, but yeah, echoing Karina, um, when I lived in Miami, which was not too long ago, you could not get anywhere without a car because public transportation was Miami, and I think a lot of parts of Florida in general is not very walkable compared to other places. But even if it were walkable, the lack of trees in the area doesn't make it sustainable to kind of like walk and wait at the bus stop because it's just so hot. So it's kind of like you either um have a bus stop near your area, but it's way too hot because there's no
Oh,
trees because they cut it down to build more buildings, or it's not walkable and you need a car. So there's no win-win situation. And I think that for the first question, like, what are your conclusions and recommendations? I feel like this goes back to a previous conversation of just voting, um, and seeing how local representatives are either like what are their stance on public transportation? What are they doing about it? And then maybe gathering up the community and advocating for that. But it's a little difficult, but I think that's where we start with the people because that's the communities that we're living in. And so, you know, yeah, it starts with community.
yeah, I think I agree. I agree with you a lot. And one thing that you just said is if people are having apartments closer to bus stops and it's even within a walking distance and there is heat in excess or excess heat, it's difficult for people to walk to those bus stops. I've not really thought of that. And I think it's making a lot of sense because people wouldn't love to walk within excess heat for about 12 minutes or 10 minutes to even go to bus stops. It should be much more closer to them, but yeah, assuming we're using 10 minutes or maybe less than 10 minutes, a lot of apartments wouldn't have been within that proximity. It's gonna be so far from them, and then yeah.
I feel like also, like, let's say people do walk and wait at the bus stop and it's hot, there's like a severe lack of heat education to know, oh, okay, this isn't normal. I might be getting a heat stroke, or I need to bring water or sunscreen. Like, there's not enough talk about, like, we always hear the word extreme heat, but we never hear like the attached educational aspects to it. And I feel like we should be informed about that in order to brave whatever heat's out there at the moment. So, yeah. Yeah, Karina, I am so disappointed in the fact that Florida's law had banned that, and yeah, ridiculous.
The fact that it was written into a law, like they felt the need to put it into a law. Like, for people that are watching the video, I was sharing in the chat that there's a new Florida law that bans local heat protection for workers. And this started like earlier this year. So you know, people that work the farms, we're not, according to this law, we're not allowed to give them protection, which is incredible to me.
But doesn't that go against OSHA?
You would think it does, and I would assume that OSHA would be the first one going out there and be like, wait, that is not right. That is illegal. But
Right.
it got written into law.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think just as I mean, you guys were mentioning, to be honest, I feel like the only thing we could do now is to look at, leaders that are much more climate inclined, that are, much more concerned about this. And then you would be able to work with them, just as Manev mentioned. If not, I don't know. Yeah. And on the next slide, we started to discuss some of the solutions that we could talk about. And we were just trying to find what CCLS, CCL does a lot of lobbying and stuff. So what CCL could actually also do when it comes to this heat in our cities, or when it comes to ways that we could, reduce these carbon emissions in our cities, and ways that we could support something. And we found out this bill, which is the HR 2945 climate bill. And it is a bill that is actually sponsored by Rep. Rubin with 4 other co-sponsors. And if maybe CCL is able to someday somehow focus on this and also help, and if this bill is actually able to being passed, I think it's gonna go a long way to help a lot of city planners to also get something to base on, get something to implement some of the plans, and then maybe other organizations would also get something that actually support the activities in building certain things, and then getting funds from the government to establish some of these mini things, or example the bus stops that we're talking about, and then a whole lot. I think if these such bills like this are passed, they are major things that have major impact in this climate solution. Yeah, and apart from this, I think the others people could also work on their own. And we also made other recommendations on the last slide, based on the series that we spoke about, which were the LA and then Columbus, Franklin County. So these were just normal recommendations, which were proper city planning. And talking about the bill, when the bill is being passed, it's actually going to empower some organizations, and it's I think gonna empower some sort of education. Organizations are also gonna go out to educate people as they work on these bus stops, as they work on these transport systems. They're also gonna educate locals or people that live in the society, because I've realized when there is work going on in a city or in a place, people do ask questions a lot. That is one thing I realized this summer. When you go out to do something, collect data or do work for the city, people really inquire a lot, ask what you are doing, especially if you are in their surrounding. And I feel like these things will empower people to also get educated and know much more about what to do to, reduce or mitigate this heat in urban centers and its environments. And yeah. The other slide actually showed the references that we spoke about, we mentioned during our presentation.
Well, we usually like to end off with a quote. This one is from Ben Painter, I believe that's his last name. He is a journalist who covers a range of different topics, such as social impact, philanthropy, and other different topics. But this is his quote on urbanization. Urbanization has lured more people to bustling metropolises, but precious little thought has been given to what happens when these cities fail. Over time, the underlying systems and processes of civilization, from lead mining to offshore drilling to car commuting, slowly poison us. Power grids brown out, climate heats up, and industrial accidents ravage ecosystems and cities alike. For all the famed cities with thousands of years of continuity, Paris, London, Cairo, Athens, Rome, Istanbul, most cities just stop.
So we would like to thank you all for the opportunity, Karina, Manev, for putting this together. And we don't know if any other person have any comments.
Before we get into the comments, thank you both for this amazing presentation. I have a lot of questions that now I want to go ask my city planner people after seeing this. But I wanted to share to everybody as a reminder that we do have next month our inclusion conference. If you haven't registered, please go to cclusa.org/inclusion. It is our 3rd annual inclusion conference, and all the speakers and everything that's going to be taking place is now available on the website for everybody to see. And the conference is also free. So please share that with your chapter members and other members in your community.